Simon, thank you very much for this very, very kind introduction. And at this point, thank you, the organizers of the NGSE series, and also Vincent for this platform and for giving me the opportunity to give this talk today. And for everyone who makes it at this late time after a long working day to this platform, yeah, welcome. So I'm Leonard. I achieved my PhD in physics from TUM just 1 month ago in the group of functional materials. And yeah, now the next exciting step will follow. And currently I'm looking for a postdoc position. So today we're going to talk about perovskite and organic solar cells. So we'll introduce them quickly. I will give you a short overview of advanced X-ray scattering techniques that we're using in our group. And then it's about the main topic of my PhD, which is space characterization of perovskite and organic solar cells on a suborbital rocket. And then also doing some post-flight X-ray analysis. And I will close with a summary. So here on the top left, I'm showing you the best research cell efficiencies from NREL with the silicon technology as a reference. And as you might know, organic solar cells have emerged around 25 years ago, at least on this chart. And efficiencies are approaching closely to 20% or reaching 20%. You can see here that an organic solar cell can be manufactured in a roll-to-roll process. It's flexible, and Heliatech, for example, is already commercializing them. An even younger technology that is perovskite, that's not even 15 years old, or maybe it is just becoming 15 years old. And today it's already reaching efficiencies comparable to those of silicon. Here you can see a bifacial large module by IMEC, and yeah, so this module has a considerable size. And then I want to highlight what is possible regarding the scale. So here is a outdoor real-world perovskite panel farm by Pescatelli et al. And they could work or let it work and produce power for around 1 year. So we have an increase in efficiencies, also in module sizes and in lifetime. So making organic and perovskite solar cells very interesting technologies. Let's stick to this, and I will quickly just introduce perovskite. So it's a hybrid crystal structure, as you all might know. And this material is creating the absorber layer in a solar cell sandwiched by blocking layers. And then you have the electrodes that complete the stack, all deposited on a substrate. In organic semiconductors, usually one is using a blend of donor and acceptor. In this case, it's a small molecule acceptor, and they form a bulk heterojunction absorber layer. And the stacking apart from that is kind of similar. What these two materials have in common, I mean, also quantum dots do the same, they can be deposited from solution. And this makes it possible to use upscalable solution techniques such as lock die coating. This is printing from an ink. Here you can see a schematic, yeah, how this can look like, and how it actually looks like in our lab is this here. I'm going to show you a short video about this. So we have the printhead here. The yellow perovskite ink is flowing in the meniscus, and the meniscus is dragged over the substrate, creating a thin, wet film. Then the next step, we have this air null blowing nitrogen to remove the solvent, to quench it, and to trigger crystallization. And then you can see how it crystallizes by this black optoelectronically active phase. And this film in the end is around 500 nanometers thin and mirror-like, which we want to have. Okay, some words about the expertise of our group, or let's say first of our group. I'm going to show you not the group, but our group approach, which is advanced X-ray scattering methods on thin films. And for this, I want to introduce the triangle, which ranges from processing that defines morphology and structure, which in turn defines also functional properties. So this is a list of methods we're usually using in the group, and all these methods I've also used during the work of my PhD. So the processing can be done by lab scale spin coating, but we also have a slot die coater, and we can do spray deposition. Classical morphology and structure analysis techniques include, but are not limited to AFM, SEM, profilometry, and XRD measurements. Then the functional properties can be investigated in thin film with UV-Vis, PL, and lipsometry. And of solar cell devices using EQE and IV. So what is now our X-ray scattering? So when I'm talking about advanced X-ray scattering, I mean JISAX, which is grazing incident small angle X-ray scattering, and the wide angle sister technique, JIWAX. And these two techniques are the key of our group, because what we can do with this, if we have a brilliant source, is first of all do in situ experiments. And these in situ experiments, they allow to shed light on the kinetic evolution of morphology and structure during processing. And we also can do operando measurements, which means that we have a device that is operating, for example, a solar cell. And while we're characterizing it with IV and shining light onto it, we can also see how morphology and structure change. So basically, what we want to do is to advance the understanding of the nanoassembly and also the structure-function relationship. So I'm going to introduce you now these two techniques, grazing incident small and wide angle X-ray scattering. So here you can see the classical setup. We have an X-ray beam that is coming in a shallow angle onto a sample, and the scattered intensity is detected with a two-dimensional detector. So we have the small angle scattering. That means we're looking at intensity that is scattered in the small angle that is here, that is JISAX. So basically, this intensity arises from diffuse scattering at materials critical angle. And by doing that, we can get information about sizes inside, typical sizes inside our thin films, ranging from few to hundreds of nanometers. And this is what I call here microscale structure or morphology. Then we also have the wide angle X-ray scattering, which is kind of a complementary method to XRD. So the physical basis on this is similar as for XRD, the refraction at crystal lattices. And what is different, however, is that with one single illumination shot, we can, as you can see here, collect multiple rings, where each ring is like a Scherer ring, a polycrystalline sample that is probed and creating these different reflexes. So what we can do, what we can access is not only phases, but also phases, the orientation of phases, preferential orientation, which is texture. And these two experiments can be done at the same time. So here, for example, there is a rendering of a in situ slot die coating process at the beamline, where we could measure JISAX with the rear detector and JIWAX with the close by detector for the large angles, and basically follow the kinetic processes during printing and crystallization of perovskite. Then I want to quickly introduce you a new software that we could develop during the time of COVID, because the labs were closed, so we could work a lot at the computers. So it's called InSight. It stands for In Situ JISAX, JIWAX heuristic tool. And it's a Python-based scripting tool, which allows for fast and facile processing of especially large kinetic data sets. So we had a focus on having a high performance and also of maximizing the data access and also the quality for the user, that you can basically get your data out and control it and so on at every point, but it's a whole like all-in-one solution. So basically from your raw data to your publication ready plotting functions. I have here attached the QR code because it's accepted, but it's not published yet. So the QR code points you to the DOI that is going to be, I think it's going to be published in the beginning of February, hopefully. So what can we do with these techniques? I'm giving you one example regarding in situ JIWAX, in this case of perovskite annealing. So we have deposited a two-step perovskite film by slot die coating, and the third step, that is the interdiffusion during heating, which creates actually the methylammonium-led triiodide perovskite film. And what we're doing is we monitor the step, and in the beam time at DESY, this can look like this. So we have the X-ray optics that creates the X-ray beam, basically lets it through, and then the sample is positioned here, and the X-ray, the scattered X-ray signal is registered by the detector. The sample is positioned on a heating stage, so we can heat the sample, and everything for alignment is on a hexapod that we can align the sample in a proper way. So this is how a GIWAX pattern looks like, and this is image 0, so this is when starting. And now I'm going to show you a video how it evolves. And as you can see, there are things changing. Some inner rings disappeared and some other rings got stronger. And after that, okay, it seems to be kind of stable. So what we have here at this Q value of 1 is the perovskite ring, this bright ring here. Slightly inside of that, we have lead iodide, and further inside, we have solvent perovskite complexes. I'm going to show you the video again, and you can see how these complexes vanish and the perovskite ring gets stronger and grows. So there we can in situ follow the disintegration of these solvent complexes and the formation of perovskite. And what is even more is that by having this GIWAX, we can go to pole figures and go to material quantities. So we can really start with the kinetic rate equations. And in that case, we use Brahmi modeling to find kind of constrained growth of the perovskite. In another example, I'm showing you operando GIWAX of a perovskite solar cell, and in this case, in different atmospheres. So here we have this pattern at the start in vacuum, and we illuminate the sample in vacuum, and we operate the solar cell, the solar cell at the same time. And what we can see, so this is the first order perovskite, as you've seen before. Let's go to the second order, because there we have a higher angular resolution. What you can see is that here is some, like a second ring occurring, and this is due to phase segregation. We're using this perovskite here, and then a pure FAPI phase is created. And this phase segregation actually just occurs in vacuum. How to analyze this further? So what we can do is we integrate the signal radially and fold it to a line cut. And then we can plot this line cut over time. So we have multiple vertical line cuts here, and we can see how things change with time. For the sample in vacuum, you can see that actually, yes, here's something changing, here's something weird, while in nitrogen atmosphere, it seems to be completely stable. So at the same time, we did maximum power point tracking with sometimes measuring the IV curves. And by doing that, we found that in vacuum, you actually have a strong decrease of power conversion efficiency within the first 20-25 minutes. Actually, in the same time where we have these changes observed, this phase segregation in GIWAX. In nitrogen, we have actually no change in the, no real change in the fill factor, where the fill factor here is actually the thing that is dominantly decreasing. And yeah, so by doing more analysis, so why could this happen and so on, one can reveal degradation mechanisms that act in vacuum but are somehow protected in nitrogen. Okay, so this about the group. Now let's jump to from vacuum to space-time, and I'm going to motivate the entire space research I have performed. So here you can see an ultra-thin organic solar cell. I said we can process these solar cells from inks. This means we can process them on thin plastic foils. And in this case, ultra-thin means the entire device is thinner than 2 micrometers. Together with a power conversion efficiency of 4%, we can create a new number. So basically, power conversion efficiency is kind of the power per area. And with the thickness, we can calculate the weight per area. So we can generate a new number that is the power per weight, or a specific power. And the specific power is an important number when it comes to space applications. Basically, it's the currency of space applications. And you can see here 4 different technologies. So here on the left, we have the panels, and here we have the cells. This ultra-thin organic photovoltaic device could reach a specific power of 10 watts per gram. This is a semi-logarithmic, this is a logarithmic scale. So this shows that there is a huge gap between this and the classically employed silicon or gallium arsenide-based technologies for space applications. In a more recent work, a perovskite solar cell with 20% efficiency and a thickness of still thinner than 10 microns achieved 30 watts per gram. And this value is added here. So what we have is basically an order of magnitude that we can save weight on the solar cell basis. You might have noticed that we also have panels here, and just looking for a certain technology, the panels are, maybe even 1 order of magnitude below the cell specific power. This is because usually the rigid solar cells just make up a small part of the entire solar panel weight, because you have a lot of mechanics fortification of the entire structure, of motors for unfolding and stuff like that. So what we need to do in order to make these new technologies also feasible for space applications is to rethink how solar cells in space can look like. And for example, here is a large solar sail. So here are human for reference, created by DLR. At that time, not with the intention of making a solar cell out of it, but this is how it could look like to really benefit from our lightweight technologies. Okay, so regarding the application in space, we need to test them. And so for this, we want to know what is the environment we're in. So we have strong UV radiation from the AM0 space sun spectrum. We have, of course, vacuum. We have extreme temperatures and cycling, and we have radiation on our solar cells. So the first step to do is terrestrial simulations of these conditions. And in our early work, our group tested organic solar cells in vacuum and with AM0 spectrum. And actually the stability was surprising for everyone because nobody expected these soft organic compounds to withstand UV radiation. And your work also investigated, for in this case, the stability upon temperature cycling, also for organic solar cell. And it seems that they can withstand this cycling without really sacrificing some power conversion efficiency or really destroying the devices. Also, there have been performed radiation tests with perovskite and organic solar cells. And actually, these technologies appear to be very tolerant against radiation. And also for perovskites, for example, there occur self-healing effects. And this makes them really promising in this regard. However, we need to be careful because just using the testing protocols that have been used for decades, developed for the other technologies, cannot be one-to-one be adapted for the new technologies, because then you might get misleading results because the tests cannot 100% perfectly resemble the real space conditions. So we need to be careful with our interpretation, and what we need in addition is real-world testing. And in this regard, balloon flights have been the first step, where in such stratospheric balloons, the solar cells can be exposed at above 30 kilometers altitude to near space conditions. And Cardinaletti et al. 2018 published this work where they measured organic and perovskite solar cells for several hours in these conditions, and they worked. And this brings me to, and recently there's a new work with even having organic solar cells of more than 3 watts per gram on such a balloon. So it's also possible to do these kind of experiments with flexible, lightweight solar cells. And this brings me to the next step, which I call here flying perovskite and organic solar cells to space. So here on the left, you can see how such a suborbital rocket flight trajectory looks like. And here on the right, this is the experiment that we used in our labs during testing with the solar simulator. So this was our CAD sketch of the experiment, where you can see it's a round ring with 8-fold segmentation with 8 windows where the solar cells are placed. And we also wanted to monitor the environment to have as much data as possible and to maximize data collection. One of these windows looks like this, where we have one spot for solar cell here on top and a second one on the bottom, and in between we have some sensors. So from sketch to reality, this is how the final made experiment looked like. And I will talk you quickly through the most important parts. So here on the left, we have the electronics situated on the bottom plate. That is all mounted here. And we have these insertion modules that are here with the face-on look. And here we have the organic module and this insertion module on top and the perovskite module on the bottom. You can see here there's a shadow mask that is also fixing the solar cells. And each module has 8 solar cells with this aperture here. What we have in addition is here these small sensor boards, including temperature sensor and light sensor. Okay, some words about the data acquisition system. You can see one of these 8 versions here, where we have a microcontroller that is controlling the measurement side and in the end writing the data to a micro SD card. And how do we do these measurements? So in the end, it's actually not as complicated as it might seem. So we want to mimic what a Keithley does, which is sweeping voltage of the solar cell and measuring its current. So what we have here is a virtual ground. This is fixed at 2.5 volts. And we have this digital analog converter that can apply a certain voltage set by the microcontroller. And this ranges from 0 to 5 volts. I mean, in this range, we can operate. We're not using the entire range in the end. And by applying a certain voltage, here we will have a voltage drop across the solar cell, a voltage drop across this series resistor that we have, and we will have a certain current flowing. So what we can do now is we can use ADCs, analog digital converters, that measure voltages. And by measuring the voltage drop across the solar cell, we know this voltage of the solar cell. We can similarly measure the current via measuring the voltage drop across this resistor and convert it via Ohm's law. One solar cell measurement in total, including forward and backward sweep, took around 10 seconds. And of course, we did some tests of the quality of these measurements. And for this, we used a stable silicon photodiode and compared our rocket setup with the Keithley laboratory setup. And we found for the dark and for the illuminated measurements, individually, no real difference. So we have high quality measurements. The solar cells we used for this experiment are shown here. So we have in total 4 different types of solar cells. On the left, you can see the perovskite ones. This is also a classical MAFA perovskite. One's here in mesoporous titania blocking layer architecture, and one's here with planar tin oxide. Then we have 2 organic solar cell types, where we have on top the polymer fullerene active layer, bulky heterojunction, and here we have polymer small molecule acceptor. And both here use, as we have here, the same top. In the right is molybdenum oxide and silver, and on the left we have classical spiro and gold on top. Okay, these solar cells in the pre-test achieved an average of the perovskites around 15 or 17% efficiency, and the organic ones around 6%. And with this, at the time of the rocket flight, these were quite good and therefore representative state-of-the-art perovskite and organic solar cells. We took these solar cells and went with them to northern Sweden, where we launched our rocket. And here you can see how the rocket looks like in the start tower. The entire rocket is 12.5 meters long, with the payload being this here, and we're one very small of many experiments. Okay, so the rocket launch took place in northern Sweden, as I said before, in 2019, and here you can see the launch from the GoPro perspective on the top, and the rocket lifts off with around 10 G acceleration, and it's spinning to stabilize. And yeah, around 4 minutes into the flight, we are already at 240 kilometers altitude. This is the peak altitude, and then after that, it slowly starts falling again. Here we can see that it's drifting slowly, so we have different illumination conditions during the flight. Just 13 minutes into the flight, the thing comes back down on a parachute and lands in northern Sweden, and then we can recover it and recover the solar cells, recover the data, and want to know if it all worked. So let's go into the data. Here I'm showing you the short circuit current density at first. So again, we have the 4 different solar cell types, and these 4 colors of the active layers color code the 4 colors that you find here. In addition, we have these symbols that allocate the position in our payload. So basically, one symbol plus its color define which solar cell measurement it is. And we're talking about short circuit current density, meaning that every single data point that we see here is obtained from one sweep. So we basically one measurement every 5 seconds here. And we know that the photocurrent is somehow proportional to the solar power that is shining onto the solar cells. So we can see here really that we have different illumination conditions during the flight. But we still don't know how much sun we received. For this, I was talking about these light sensors before, and actually these 2 boards that I showed you, they are somehow tilted with respect to each other. So every single light sensor is pointing in a distinct direction. So if the sun is shining, let's say from the top side, the blue sensor will register a higher value. We can also do a calculation, so going to a sensitivity map of one sensor. This means if the sun is, for example, shining onto the sensor from this position, we expect a sensitivity normalized of 0.6. We can also turn this around. So if the sensor measures 0.6, we know that the sun is somewhere on this contour plot of 0.6. And by combining not only one, but all these 16 sensors that we have in total, we can draw multiple of these kind of rings of the illuminated sensors. And exactly at the point where these rings intersect, we can allocate the position of the sun. By using Bayesian optimization and also Monte Carlo Markov chain modeling, we could consistently sample the posterior probability distribution of the solar cell irradiance onto every single solar cell during the entire main measurement time of flight that you can see here on the top right. So just for a validity check, so for example here, this number 1 that shows here the highest solar irradiance converts here to the segment circle that also shows the highest short circuit current densities. So what we can do now is we can basically resort our short circuit current density measurement, going from as a function of time to as a function of irradiation. And we can do this not only with this one parameter, but with all the 4 important parameters extracted from one solar cell sweep. So we have the VOC, the fill factor, and in the end also the power conversion efficiency. So let's sort a little bit these graphs for you. Here we have the short circuit current. Here we see like an increase, but there's like a curve. This curve can mostly be attributed to the fact that for high solar inclinations, we have some shadowing. So meaning that at lower irradiations, actually not the entire cells are illuminated. Then for the VOCs, we see slightly different trends. So for the perovskite solar cells, the VOC increases with irradiation. For organic solar cells, it levels off, starting at intermediate irradiations. So just as a remark, classical testing conditions are around here, 1000 watt per gram. Watts per square meter, sorry. Then we can look at the fill factors, and they are kind of constant, maybe a slight decrease due to temperature in the end, and the power conversion efficiencies behave like this. What we can do from the power conversion efficiencies is, for the next slide, extract the best performing solar cells. But just to summarize this here, all these solar cells show a behavior that is in agreement to terrestrial tests we did before. So this means, and also other work did, so this means that we have no unexpected effects kicking in. The solar cells behave as anticipated, which is a very good thing. So that means we can also project our terrestrial tests to lifetime of these cells in space, at least with a limited strength. Okay, so this is the champion performance measurements in space for all these 4 solar cell types, where the perovskite solar cells reach efficiencies of 12 or 14%, and the organic one 6 or 5%. So they all reach the promising efficiencies in space environment. So these measurements are actually performed in space above 100 kilometers, and this after the travel to Sweden, after mounting them, the rocket launch, and also some environmental exposure. So this is actually quite encouraging. So, but still we have some differences, and the question arises now, did the experiment have an influence on the solar cells? And for this, we performed post-flight characterization of the morphology and the structure of these cells. And we did it the following way. So we have 3 sample groups, one that stayed in Munich in the glove box, one travel group that traveled to the experiment but didn't fly, and one group that flew with the rocket, and we brought it all back, and then went together with all the 3 packages to Hamburg and to DESY and started our measurements. Regarding JISAX, so here I'm already showing you the modeling. We can see that for the perovskite ones, we have a slight decrease of large domains, and also small domains tend to shrink a little bit. For the organic devices, we see that basically the medium-sized domains kind of agglomerate, so they grow a little bit, and also that the travel influences the morphology already. But still, these changes that we see here, that they are not strong. So it's minor morphological changes for our systems, but some changes can be observed. Let's go to faces, orientation, crystallinity measured with GIWAX. So here I'm showing you the pseudo XRD, this radial integration that you have seen before. And what we can see from this one here is that no new lead iodide occurs. We have no phase segregation. So this is all stable. And also the orientation of the reflexes by doing an azimuthal integration sort of radial seems to be totally stable. So the perovskites, in terms of crystallinity, they are stable. The organic solar cells, however, they show that there is slight changes in PCBM. So here I'm just showing you the fullerene, and we have a slight increase, which is possibly due to a slight agglomeration, which we also saw in GISAX, which you can see here that there is a slight increase for the space samples. And also for the ITIC, for the small molecule acceptor, that we can see that the phases sample a little bit in denser packing. Okay, with this, I come to my conclusion, to my summary already. I hope that I could show you the power of these in situ and operando GISAX and GIWAX measurements. I forgot to say before that our group is always highly interested in starting new collaborations. So please just approach me if you want to talk about your samples or systems, or you have questions about these measurement methods or data evaluation. I'm always happy to help you. Then I showed you about the main project of my PhD, this design principle and flight of the experiment with the first ever space characterization of perovskite and organic solar cells. And in addition, we performed a detailed parameter analysis, and also the post-flight characterization showed stable structures of the space probe solar cells. So this, taken together, is paving the way for future orbital missions. That will be the next step. Okay, with this, I want to come to my acknowledgements, and I want to thank everyone involved in this work. You can see the group here, and here this is actually the campaign group from northern Sweden. And I want to thank all the funding here. And yeah, as you can see, this is not funding, but this is me. And yeah, I want to thank you all for joining this talk. I want to thank the organizers again for giving me this awesome platform, for yeah, giving you this talk here. And yeah, thank you all for joining, and thank you for your attention.